And the county has hired us to go through site evaluation, look at some possible new sites for an airport around the county. There was already a study done on the existing airport, so we're going to use that data from the Stafford Municipal Airport. I have my borrowed copy over there to look at. So this is what we're going to talk about tonight. Introductions, goal, tasks, evaluation factors, and I do have a little bit longer printout over there if you want to take notes on it or keep track of anything there. I don't know, I'm just doing a few slides from the Olsson Associates. As an airport team, we have a dedicated airport team of 11 staff that works solely on airports, so that's our real expertise. But the company actually has offices throughout the Midwest. Our headquarters is Lincoln. We have offices in Olathe, Overland Park, Manhattan, Kansas, as well as Oklahoma City. But the company provides full-service civil engineering, so we have all that background. We have a team that does power electrical that can perhaps advise me on the big power line out there. We have a team that does transportation and railroad design. So if I need any details on that, I've got that with me. So what are we here today? According to the grant from KDOT, and KDOT is paying 95% of the study costs. We're just going to look at a site that best meets the objectives of the community. So really what I'm here a lot tonight is to gather what are the objectives of the community. Do we want the longest runway possible? Do we want the site that's closest to town? You know, there's all sorts of different things that you can have in an airport that don't always, you can't have it all. So we figure out what it is, and oftentimes we come up with some sort of scoring system, and maybe not tonight, but throughout the process of different objectives that we want to meet and how we're going to go about doing that. So really what we need to talk about is what's important for a factor when we go to select a site. And I do have printed out here kind of and we can get to this a little bit later, but we have an aerial photo where we put in the railroad tracks, and we've kind of gone over Google and just looked at the dots are where we think there's a house. So oftentimes we want to avoid the house and things like that. But I mean, so you know, what factors are people looking at for an airport? I don't know, my pointer's going to work too well. I mean, right along the highway is any highway is usually a good choice, especially if you have an entrance road right off the highway, right next to the highway. It's very visible. People remember it's there, they use it, or you know, something that's close to town. You don't want anything. Oftentimes, I've done about maybe 5 site selection studies in the last 10 years, and this is the first one I've done for a county. Previously, I've done it just for a city, and they said, okay, we don't want to go more than 5 miles from town or 3 miles from town. We just draw a circle around town, and that's the area we look at. But it's a little more complicated with the county, and especially with 2 towns that are somewhat equal in size, to try and figure out. I don't want to, do we want to go between the 2 towns? What the thoughts are there? Does anybody have any real thoughts on proximity to?
Well, there was discussion before, the city of Stafford involved, so to where the airport, the project then would be at the existing facility or in a proximity of Stafford. I think when the county got involved and financially got involved, that the discussion became more to centrally locate the airport.
Also noted that the hospital was in Stafford.
Yeah.
Also took that into consideration as we understood that was a pretty big factor in deciding proximity to the hospital.
Now, when it comes to KDOT funding for the actual airport, that is something that's one of the goals of the state, is to have an airport that's usable by air ambulance or by medical services, close by. I don't think they have an exact distance, but we had talked about that earlier, that the hospital is in Stafford. So we might lean a little bit more in that direction than another. You have a number of paved roads out there in the county, so we'd like to keep it on a paved road. Along the highway, is that important, or just it's a nice to have? I mean, kind of going on a scale of 1 to 10 or 1 to 5. Does anybody have an opinion?
Like as far as, if you're looking at medevac and transport services specifically, I think along the highway is going to be a pretty, I mean, it's going to rank fairly highly, and the notes that you mentioned earlier about visibility and location and access to local economies, I think that's going to be a fairly important factor, having it as close to a main highway or county blacktop as you can get it to.
And the county owns a quarter 15-281 intersection as well.
Yeah, she showed me that. So the problem with your current airport is that the county has a road on the half-mile line, and, you know, we're looking at a runway, I would suggest at least 4,000 feet long, and then we have to have a safety area, approach area on each end. So we need about a mile in length to find a space, and so that's the problem. Is trying to figure out where that fits. You know what? My slide is not correct. Hey. I cannot tell you what happened there. But anyway, those are the other factors. So topography, you know, rolling hills versus flatland. Boy, I drove around. I looked at. I filled up with gas in Stafford, and I put 70 miles on, driving around in and out of the roads. Look, it's there. I don't think topography is a problem.
And yet we did point out some areas, kind of even in between here and Stafford, that have. There are a few.
There's a little bit of a rough areas.
There's still some problems.
Yeah, and sometimes too flat is a problem because it doesn't drain. And if it doesn't drain, then that causes pavement problems and reduces the life of your pavement over time. So there's kind of a balance there. We're also looking at location of if there's underground gas lines. There's a Trans-Canada line I saw out there. Above ground power lines versus the big power line with big H frames up there. But there's also a power line that runs parallel to Highway 50 at a half mile south of Highway 50 that's larger than normal. I mean, there's a lot of ground over there that's very flat and would be handy, but there's power line right through the middle of that whole section. So we're kind of looking at, I think we've found most everything out there. We'll continue to look for those sort of
Between here and Stafford, there's two towers out here.
Yep.
East of town
Yep.
are a problem, or in between the two.
Yep, I marked those on my map. I've got all kinds of scribbles on my map. I found 2 towers. The landfill is sometimes a problem if that attracts birds. And at a larger landfill, you know, you get gulls and all kinds of birds and wildlife there, so you want to stay away from the landfill. I don't think that's a big problem here. I think in general, there's deer everywhere. And so just kind of looking at those sorts of things. Airspace obstructions goes to the towers and the power lines and those sorts of things. We need to clear the road by 15 feet, and we need to clear a railroad by 23 feet. That's the largest item that's allowed to go down the railroad track currently in the federal regulations. So we look at all of that. Land needs. So two things in that is how many acres of land do we need? If you're going to go straight north, you can find spaces straight north-south, and you just buy a rectangle, somewhere around 100 acres, 110 acres seems to fit pretty well. So you don't even need, but it's not like you could buy a square 160-quarter section. You have to buy parts of 2-quarter sections to make it work. So obviously, you know, we want less expensive land is typically the goal, which means we need to avoid pivots. And that, I don't know that I can find 2-quarter sections next to each other that don't have a pivot. So, I mean, we could tell from the aerial photo where a lot, you know, obviously you can see where a lot of those pivots are, and Carolyn had a map with some dots on where the pivots are. So we'll take a look at that and factor that in. You know, those areas where pivots are going to score lower than something that's unobstructed. We're going to look at, you know, we want to avoid homes. We don't want to disrupt people in their houses. We don't have to, and we don't want to move roads if we don't have to. We also, we don't want, well, school's not a problem, but sometimes it is. We don't want the approach to the runway right over the school. So just kind of land uses in general, what's around there, and you're not looking at a real lot of jet aircraft, so noise is not going to be a big problem. I would suspect we'll have some crop dusters. And, you know, so there's some burst of activity in there. So that's what we're talking about, land needs, and just trying to find a space that would be economical. Neighboring properties is kind of the schools and the houses and trying to avoid that. Personally, I would love to live right next to an airport because I think it's really fun to sit on your porch and watch airplanes come and go. But some people don't like it, so.
I've been in a situation before. I used to fly for skydiving operations, and even with an airport being located a couple miles out of town, we still ran into a lot of issues with that. And that's why keeping in mind some areas, having an aircraft approach over town, even if it's not directly over like a school or hospital, church or anything, just having a traffic pattern that goes over, you know, populated places. I've seen issues before. It's people will live a half mile away from the railroad tracks and not have any problem, but that one airplane a week causes some issues for the, that's just a deal with city council and everything else with the community forum that I've been involved in that haven't been pleasant.
You know, there's actually studies, you know, if you live next to a busy highway or railroad where it's constant, that is just kind of a background drone noise and you don't hear it anymore. But when you hear that one single aircraft that's actually quieter than the semi-truck, it's because it's unusual and yeah, that's what wakes you up. Yeah, unfortunately it's true. So, okay, yeah, that's a good idea.
So when you say the approach, really, I mean, in most cases, our towns are at takeoff, aren't they? I mean, if our prevailing wind is.
Well, typically, yeah, you're going to hit north and south. The wind's going to be out of the north in the winter. So your runway is typically going to be north-south. There is a wind analysis in that old report we can use, but they had two options for a runway were north-south, and one was kind of a northwest-southeast runway. So
you'd be probably looking at maybe a 1 to 3 mile distance north and south of that airport as far as noise issue, as far as departing aircraft are concerned. So just community, if there's a community directly north or south of the main prevailing runway would be the only one that you would be concerned about.
okay,
Which,
yeah.
to me, if you're looking at that, really be more St. John, probably is being direct. If you looked at the area like where the county owns, that's directly south of the town, 3 miles. Is that sufficient?
Yeah, it'd probably be on the edge, but I mean that stuff doesn't bother me, so it's easy for me to dismiss it. But just the situations I've been in, and where that was at was actually up at Wamego, Kansas, and we were actually east of town, and so our takeoff approach pattern wasn't even over town, but the circling pattern was within 2 miles from town. And so at Stafford, you have that neighboring town 2 miles away, but then here you go to the approach end of the runway, then you're 2 miles to St. John north and south. But just depending how you would be able to write up your traffic patterns as far as approach, left or right approach or anything else like that, being able to avoid that, whatever gives flexibility on that.
Okay.
So just as far as location
Yeah,
considerations
something
go.
just to consider, yeah, you know, it's one more factor to kind of put in there. And what we like to do then is kind of come up with a list of things that we think fit the community and things that we've heard, and maybe come up with some sort of scoring system. So, and proximity might be 3 times the weight of environmental factors, environmental impacts center, noise, as well as wetlands. Now, it's not federally funded, so we don't have to go through the whole NEPA process, but we do need to be aware of the impacts and try and avoid those. So we will get there are maps online that show you where all the various wetlands are. And the other thing is, if you want to build a runway through the wetland, now you're building into a wet spot, and the runway is probably going to crack and fall apart, so that's not a good idea either. Just kind of the,
We don't know what wetland.
you don't know what a wetland is. Yeah. So those are kind of now primarily we're going to look for a spot that as we look for a site, the important thing is to find a site that would fit everything you want in an airport. So, runway length is the first kind of key factor to consider. For those of you that may not know, the existing runway has the existing airport has two turf runways, 2,560 feet long and 1,900 feet long. I guess it's got to fit within that half-mile section. KDOT standards have a community airport at 3,200 feet, and I think KDOT had kind of recommended that's where Stafford would fit, a paved runway at 3,200 feet. Then a business airport would be 4,000 feet, and a regional airport would be a 5,000-foot runway. The FAA standards are based on the elevation of your site and the average temperature of the hottest day, which is July, which is around, I think, 92 degrees here, because that's aircraft performance, is elevation and temperature. So their smallest category would again be 3,200 feet. 95% of small aircraft could operate off a 3,800-foot runway, and 100% of small aircraft would be a 4,500-foot runway. So it's not, with KDOT money, you don't have to follow FAA standards, but it's just good to have kind of comparison of all that. I think a lot of the medevac people that we've talked to that operate the King Air are probably looking at about 3,500-foot minimum. So I think where KDOT is saying your community airport 3,200 might be enough, to me that feels just a little too short. To me, 3,500 would be a bare minimum, 38 or 4,000 would be better.
If KDOT states that, I mean, is that all they're willing to fund? Or if we say we want a 5,000-foot runway, is the grant still the same?
The grant, as long as you can justify that you need that 5,000-foot runway, the grant's still the same. So we started the similar process in Gove County, Quinter, about 5 or 6 years ago. Turned dirt on the runway last month, and they went with a 4,000-foot runway, and really, the only trouble with KDOT is right now their grants for runways are limited to 1.6 million. So that probably is going to get you about half of a 5,000-foot runway, maybe 2/3. So a lot of it's just a matter of how much money it's going to cost and how you can fit it within the grant requirements.
I think Shane with KDOT money is concerned that we originally, when we started this, it was trying to see if we can get some pavement at our current location just because it's so rough.
Right.
And drainage is an issue, but it was too short, and so that's where KDOT kind of said, well, we're not going to fund something. So as far as KDOT stating a preference with 3,200 minimum or 35, I think that's probably what you have to do to satisfy their willingness to fund that.
But that's not sufficient for the emergency aircraft.
The 3,500 would be, yeah, the 3,500 foot would be sufficient for medevac.
Yeah, I think if you went 3,200, KDOT would fund it, but I think you want to go at least 3,500 if you're going to medevac. And, so the question is, do we look for a site that, say, would accommodate a 4,000-foot runway? Or, if you're looking for where's the airport going to be in 20, 30, 40 years from now, you want to allow for the 5,000-foot runway.
Yeah, you want to figure where you can expand.
Yeah.
Now, because you can reapply for grants to expand, if you only fund 3,500 now, but let's plan for 4,000 down the road, so you put in for another grant later for funds to expand 3, 4, 5, 10 years down the road. That's just smart.
It makes sense.
Yeah.
Aren't renting places that you're not closing the road between 4,000 and 5,000 feet.
No, you're gonna close something somewhere.
Probably 4,000 feet you can get in without closing the road, but over that probably
On
not.
time.
Yeah, maybe between that 3,500 and 4,000 foot.
But you definitely want that in the plan for expansion. And then you can get more grants and get more paid for all the time.
Well, and it's going to take a little while to get it established, get the runway paved, and then, the next goal is really to kind of get some buildings there where the people, I don't know what's going to happen to the existing site. Are those buildings all privately owned on the existing site?
All in one,
Which one does the city own then?
the big one,
Oh, really?
the big one, it's the city.
Okay. When you first drive in, that one that's big, right there?
Yeah.
Okay. Usually the city owns the one that's in more shape.
Well, that's the one that the storm blew down, so otherwise there probably wouldn't be one.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Years
I mean, in general, 3,500 feels like a good starting point, and
A lot of that will depend on what kind of funding the county's got. Like I say, the bigger you go to start with, the more they're gonna have to
correct.
throw in. Yeah, I'm just thinking in terms of stages to be able to fund it better. If they got the money.
What
Get
percent
4,000 to start with.
would be not paid on 38?
Well, they have been doing 9 to 10 grants, although with the Gove County Airport,
That's what we planned, that we budgeted for.
But it's 1.6. 1.6 is the limit, right?
yeah, that's the current limit.
So
So the county shares,
Cost to put in 5 or 38 or 4,000, they're only gonna do 1.6.
1.6.
Start buying land, that could eat up.
well, that they'll do that in a separate grant, so you'll have a grant typically. So what we're gonna do is just kind of find a site and Photoshop in a runway there, and then the next step would be to actually do a ground survey of the site and study, what do I want to say,